Alles mit kurzen Wegen. Dachte mal, das einzige Nachteil ist, okay, wenn man geht, aber die
So guys, just a reminder when you're speaking into microphones, please speak into your microphones.
Like this?
Yeah, exactly.
So do I steal your microphone or
Of
I
course.
steal his microphone?
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
You can do either. But I'll give it to you.
Not like this. Keine Rückkopplung. Wir müssen
Okay, great. Ready?
Yeah.
Everyone ready? Okay. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And welcome to today's panel discussion on ESG and sustainability in electronics manufacturing. It's a huge topic. Environmental, social, and governmental risk management is complex, interconnected, and difficult. This panel is going to explain some of the techniques and strategies used by EMS companies. I'm delighted to be joined on the panel by Otto Puck, who's the CEO of INCAP on the end there. Next to him is Mark Achhammer, who's the COO of CATEC. Next to him is Josef Ernst, who is the CEO of ASM PT SMT Solutions, Assembly, sorry. And next to him we have Anthony Ambrose, who's the CEO of Data.io. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. So I'll get straight in with my first question, which is, what are the key environmental challenges and considerations that electronics manufacturers face when striving to improve their ESG performance? And I'll start off with you on the end, Otto, on that one, if you want to take
Yes. Sorry. Thank you very much. I think the key, or the biggest problem actually is that if you look at us EMS companies, then we are just one part of the value chain. And very often the decisions that are most influential when it comes to environmental issues are taken in the design phase by our customers and so. So for us, it could be so that we just lift our hands and say that no, everybody else is to blame, and our, for example, carbon footprint is very low, and we focus on the social and the governmental aspects from it. But it wouldn't be right because EMS companies in de facto are like spiders in the whole web of electronic manufacturing. And here I hope that we together in the industry can take a bigger responsibility and develop the different reporting methods and so that are coming. Because currently there is a lot of talk, and there's even part of the reporting will become mandatory, but there is still no clear framework yet or clear standards that we are going to be held to. And it's very easy to be environmental friendly, for example, if you yourself set the standards and how you measure yourself and the goals and etc.
Yes, yes. I think you're right. I mean, I think the Scope 1 and Scope 2 is relatively straightforward, but when it comes to the Scope 3 regulations, then that involves your suppliers and the people in your supply chain, and trying to get them to agree is going to be, in some cases, probably quite difficult. So, Mark, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, for sure. As you said, you're right. So let's say in the moment we need to bring in our suppliers, so they take their part of responsibility in climate behavior. So, it's very difficult to get them to that. So we try, and Otto is right, we are in the middle, so we nearly need to go to them and demand it from them. Mm-hmm. We need also some help, let's say, from politics, which also, let's say, really brings them to a point that if they import things to Europe, they need to provide certain information and so on. Otherwise, I'm quite far away, so I have to bring in that information from countries where I have no influence at all, partially. Yes. So I need somebody who says, if you want to bring things to Europe, want to do business with Europe, you have to fulfill certain criteria and you have to prove them. Then I can play my role a lot stronger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Josef, what are your challenges trying to meet these standards, these ESG performance standards? I mean, you're having to source materials from all different parts of the world. Is that one of your biggest challenges? or is it the energy?
Yeah, it's obviously the key challenges, as you mentioned, is now really the scope 3 and to get the involvement of our supply chain. But I do not want to only refer to the supply chain, but first of all, also we can improve our products in the design, that we consider in the design already the CO2 consumption which is required for the supply chain to produce certain materials. So just talk about steel, mineral casting, for example. So there are differences. But then really the next step is to get the involvement of the suppliers. And then we talk not only about our supplier, but also the sub-suppliers of the supplier, to really get then also the information and a clear indication what is the CO2 consumption, and that we also can rely on this number and consider this in our design phase. So this is what we're focusing now on, also with Scope 3, where we really set up a special program that we can reduce the footprint of the CO2 footprint of our machines, but this we have to consider already whereas the design. But at the final end, I also have to agree to Mr. Achterhammer, so we also need the politics to come, that it comes up with clear regulations, as that our suppliers, because we talk about the worldwide supplier base, that they have to fulfill the requirements and also will be forced to provide us the information on their CO2 footprint. So it really has to go at the final end, hand in hand. I fully agree, obviously the EMS guys are the spiders, are somehow in between, but we're also in between, so obviously to our customers, to you guys, as well as to our supplier base. So
Absolutely.
finally it only works if we work together on this topic.
Yeah, okay. Anthony, I mean, you're a supplier, and but you've decided to sort of get a jump on all of this because you're quite far ahead in terms of implementing your green footprint.
So I have a slightly different view than my colleagues here. To me, the biggest problem is not actually going ahead and implementing effective policies to reduce CO2 emissions. For example, we buy clean power, we have carbon offsets for all of our fossil fuels. The biggest issue for me is managing the paperwork requirements to prove it to my big customers, to various governments, to exchanges, because they all say be reasonable, do it my way. And we have 100 people at Data.io. We got to almost zero on level 1 or scope 1 and scope 2 almost immediately. The next step is going to be hard to actually document this and prove it and then get to the scope 3 reductions through the supply chain. So for me, it's less of an issue for doing the right thing. All of our people wanted to do the right thing. And it happened very quickly. It's now, okay, prove it, document it, and do it in a way that satisfies governments, big customers, and other stakeholders without having to hire 5 people to go write the paperwork.
Right. I know. I mean, there's huge challenges around it, but I mean, it is becoming increasingly important. And for you companies that are publicly listed, which I think all of you are actually, it's becoming a bigger issue because your shareholders are looking at your ESG and sustainability footprints and making, investment decisions based on that. Next question is, how can electronics manufacturing companies reduce their carbon footprint through the entire product life cycle, from raw material extraction to end-of-life disposal? Now, we've all got some pretty good systems in place already dealing with sourcing materials and handling materials and energy, etc. But not that many people are really factored in the end-of-life thing that much. Do you have a view on that, Otto?
Yeah, and I think it will become more and more important that to factor in the end of life. And we see in the industry some have already gone the steps. So we have integrated both product design and also recycling into the service offering of the EMS companies. And I think we will see that more and more, that in the end of the day, we were talking about here before that in the design phase, you make, 90% of the decisions when it comes to the CO2 footprint, and having the input there from the recycling and how you can reutilize different kind of components and material, I think that is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, I fully agree. That's really where we have to think the full life cycle, and a lot is done in the product design. Now, we as an EMS, as Otto said before, we are very often too late in the process in that way to influence it. But nevertheless, the product has a life cycle, also in our production here, and we exchange parts during that time because parts are running out of, suppliers are not producing them anymore, stuff like this. So actually we have to extend that, and we are working on it, how to do that, to a thing where we can provide to our customers proposals what to exchange.
Right.
So we do that today for parts which are running out, but we can also do that for parts which have a better CO2 footprint, because they request from us to give them from cradle to gate, let's say, their CO2 footprint the product has when it's produced with us, and then we can tell them, okay, you can reduce that further if we exchange that 10 parts to competitive parts from other suppliers. And then there's also competition between the suppliers to provide that, because they see it starts to be a factor.
Yes.
Also during the production of the parts later on.
Absolutely. Joseph, I mean, I don't suppose you're involved too much in doing the end-of-life stuff, but I mean, how do you improve your carbon footprint through the product life cycle from the raw material extraction
For sure, we are not involved too much in the end of life, let me
Yeah.
say, when we talk about the PCBA, what you guys are manufacturing. But obviously, end of life for our machines plays also an important role. And as it just mentioned, like for the PCBA design, it has to be started with the design and considered in the design that you can upgrade machine, that you can reuse machine. It's a pre-owned equipment that you can repair machine, and really also from a software point of view, for example, upgrade your machine that you don't have to, let me say, dispose it after 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's first of all a long-term investment, and subsequently also that you can reuse the material. There is value behind.
Yes.
And it's finally, and maybe just also what I learned, I spent a couple of years in the quality management. It's 20 years ago, but when we produced PCBAs, and if there was one defect, we had to scrap the whole PCBA.
Yes.
And I guess what we saw 2 years ago, it changed because of the component prices significantly increased. So nobody scrapped the PCBA just because it was a repairment necessary. We looked into it's possible to repair a PCBA, and we did this because of cost, and we also can do it because of the CO2 consumption.
Right, okay. Anthony, I mean, do you have a view on this topic?
Yeah, and again, it might be a little bit different because we build systems. So when you buy a programming system from Data.io, it weighs about 1,100 pounds. And we've architected the systems not for CO2 reduction in mind, but because we thought it was the right thing to do 10 years ago, to be fundamentally upgradable in place. So if you bought a machine 10 years ago and put 1,100 pounds on air freight and into your factory, you had a machine that was state-of-the-art for 2013. Now with perhaps 20 pounds of upgrades, okay, you can have a machine that's state-of-the-art for 2023.
All right,
So you've deferred the end-of-life decision by having something that's inherently upgradable, where the vast majority of the content eventually will have to be scrapped. But if I can get 20 years of life out of a frame instead of 5, and this is a different approach. Some people in our industry are much more disposable in their thinking. I'll do a robot this year and I'll do another robot next year, and you just throw away and maybe you keep the programmers. The second part is fundamentally in the process. We have evaluated and have choices for customers on consumables, where they can move from a consumable replacement cycle every 10,000 insertions to, let's say, a consumable cycle every 250,000 insertions. So fundamentally, there's less waste.
Right.
Now, again, there's a higher upfront cost, but over the life cycle, it's actually less expensive and better for the environment and.
Right.
So I think what you're going to find is more and more people will factor in total life cycle waste management into their decision process. Right. And I think we've already started to do that. I can't claim we did it with this in mind 10 years ago. I think we just are now realizing this is also a benefit of an approach we decided to take.
Right. Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, essentially, we should be building in more backwards compatibility. So, for example, if you were to apply it to Josef's case, he wouldn't be building another pick-and-place machine with a different feeder configuration or trolley. He'd make sure that the previous feeders fit the new machine that's coming out, for example, that type of thing, so it reduces the need for waste. Yeah, okay. Excellent. So my next question, let's move into that. What role does a responsible sourcing of minerals and materials play in ensuring the sustainability and ethical aspects of electronics manufacturing? Now we're getting into the role here of, I don't know, sourcing minerals for sodas and things like that, I guess. But is that something that ever factors into your remit at all, Otto?
No, I think for sure. Now here is we as I started off with, we as an EMS company, we can do what we can in that sense, but the materials and the minerals and so there we have the big chunk of the carbon footprint and we have problems there. So far, if you look at the big distributors on components, they won't guarantee if there is conflict minerals, for example, in or right. How these minerals have been mined. They're lifting their hands because of that they don't get the information from their sources. And I think here it was mentioned before that we need to have legislation here. We need to have much firmer rules that people are giving this information in the entire value chain. I think we have a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, there are some organisations that are trying very hard to track this, these conflict minerals, especially in solders and things like that. But the problems with the smelters, it gets mined, it goes to the smelters, and these are the guys that are the middlemen, if you like, and they're not releasing the information. It's very difficult. Are you having that issue, Mark?
Yeah, we have that issue too. Let's say on certain industry like automotive, okay, we get requests to provide the conflicting mineral, so that it's free of conflicting mineral to be to be precise, and there they already design it in the product phase. We are coming always back a little bit to the same point. So they do it, and therefore I can provide it. I can do that with databases like Silicon Expert and stuff like this, so I can get the data from there, and then I can provide it. In other industries, that's not as strict, and then I have more problems. I can try to rely on the experience I did in that industries, but I cannot be 100% sure, and my capabilities to go there and check are zero, basically. As an EMS, as a middle-sized or as a bigger-sized EMS in Europe, nevertheless, okay? Because it's not paid for also.
Right, absolutely. I guess it doesn't really fall into either of your remits, this particular issue. So I'll move on to my next question, and it's how can electronics manufacturers promote social sustainability and ethical labour practices within the supply chains, especially in regions with a history of labour exploitation? I will involve you in this particular case, Joseph, because obviously you source certain things from different parts of the world. Do you look at the ethical labour practices of the people you source from?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So out of two reasons, because there's from a human being point of view, I think already we do not want to source somewhere where certain rules and legislations or from an ethical point of view or the human rights are not considered well. But it's finally it's also a legal obligation. We have the due diligence continuously to work on from a supply chain point of view. Even if we are usually then also working with our suppliers, that we can 100% assure that all the rules and especially the human rights and the ethical conditions are considered and well lived. But also their suppliers, which we then obviously do not have the immediate access always, but with our conduct guidelines and also the guidelines which our suppliers have to sign and really agree on, we assure first of all from a legal perspective that we fulfill our responsibility, but we do also checks for our supply chain that it's really lived accordingly. So do we have 100% control? No, but we really live actively our obligations. Out of two reasons, because we're all human beings and we don't want to really, also from a personal point of view, assure that everything is fulfilled, but also obviously from a legal point of view.
Okay. Anthony, I mean, do you factor into this or do you have a different answer?
No, I mean, we obviously factor into it. But I want to also point out, as a U.S. company and a U.S. listed company, we have to be in regulatory compliance, which covers a vast number of the topics you've already raised. So whether or not it's ESG or carbon reduction in the future, it's just simply the way we have to do business to be in compliance with U.S. law.
Right.
Period, full stop.
Right.
Now, going beyond that, we need to make sure that we can add additional factors, especially when we talk about things like Scope 3 or labor practices or things like that into your supplier agreements. And these are business practices that need to be brought into the supply chain consistently over time, not, drop everything and do it tomorrow. But we manage a supply chain across multiple continents. We're not nearly as large as some of these other companies, but we do have supplier code of conducts, we do have certifications, and over time we just need to continually add in more and more things that are important to our customers primarily, and ultimately investors as well.
Okay. Otto, on the labour sourcing or the ethical labour practices, is that something that you look into as well?
Yeah, no, of course, it's really important, and both at we ourselves, of course, follow all the rules, and it's not in US, it's also in Europe if you're listed, and I would say even for not listed companies, I guess it applies. So it's important, but what I take really pride in is that if you look at the whole ESG initiative in Incap, it has come from the roots. We have a very decentralized organization, and it's our employees that are very entrepreneurial in the sense, and that are out in the different units that are driving this. So it's not only about earning money, it's how you earn money that is becoming more and more important, and that I think is for all stakeholders in that sense,
Right.
and also internal ones, which I take big pride in.
So what you're saying is you've essentially built it into your culture at your company.
Yeah, no, it's an integrated part of the culture, the social aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm guessing your answer isn't going to be any different to that, Mark. So
No, my answer is not different to
I'll
that.
not waste your time by asking you the same question. So we'll move on to the next one, which is how can electronics manufacturers promote social sustainability? Oh, no, that's the one we've just been on. I apologize. What governance measures and transparency initiatives should electronics manufacturing firms implement to ensure responsible and accountable corporate practices in the context of ESG and sustainability? Who wants to take that first? Mark?
I can start, okay. For sure, it's a little bit connecting what we said before.
Yep.
You have a code of conduct to really write down what you see as a social and environmental and governmental responsibility, okay? And this code of conduct is obligatory to all our employees, it's obligatory to our suppliers, or something which is equal to that, okay? And also we get from our customers that request, okay? And so that fits very well together. Now, you have to implement that in your culture, meaning we also provide and measure the right KPIs around it. We look really in, is that lived? It's part of being the culture on it. We implement, for sure, we are forced to implement certain things we anyhow want to do, like whistleblower systems, okay?
Yep.
To make sure that somebody can really tell you that something is wrong,
Right.
and it is for him safe, it can be anonymous, he can really do it. We want to know that.
Yes.
And we want to know it if something is wrong. That is core of the culture you have to implement, okay? Then you can fight it, because you can never have 100% just by bringing in, saying we don't do it, okay?
So let me ask you, what happens, I know you're a very ethical company, but what happens if inadvertently something is wrong and it's found wrong? Do you get other fines or something? Because the way that it works in the EU is that Brussels passes these laws and things like that, and then they get passed down to the local country level to implement. And every country implements them differently, and they also monitor it differently. Whereas over in the United States, poor old Anthony here, if he breaks the rules, he goes to jail. And I'm actually serious about that. They're very, very strict about not letting you break the rules. But over here, it's very different. What is your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think of course, Incap has also factories in many countries, and And then there's a lot of different laws, not only within EU in that sense that we don't need to comply to. We also have a factory in US, and I'm well aware of the system there as well. But in the end of the day, I think it's a moral or how to say the thing that either you believe in this and you want to do it, and you want to comply and you work to comply. You can have rules and regulations, and you can be different. But it's a question of what you as a company want to do and how you want to earn your money.
Yes, I agree. Well, it looks like we've got universal agreement on that across the board. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add on this particular topic?
I think what you're getting a sense from the people here is we want to run the businesses in the proper way. I think it'll be very interesting when it comes time to have a difficult conversation with a customer where you say, look, we're doing everything you want on the environmental side. We're doing all these things. We're actually way ahead of the competition on other areas. Now, are you going to enforce that in your purchasing behaviors? Or are you just going to put it on your website with some trees and happy people dancing in the woods to try and create some sort of marketing statement? So, we say in English, this is where the rubber meets the road. Okay? And it's not just saying we're going to do something, but looking the customer in the eye and saying, okay, do you live your values too?
I mean, it's very true because, all of these initiatives cost money at the end of the day. I mean, there is a cost to implementing this. But it's within us all to be responsible and produce reliable, sustainable working practices. Josef.
I fully agree. Let me say, at the final end, it costs money. I wouldn't say yet. So there is still room for improvement, which really also comes with cost savings. At the final end, you also save energy, and therefore also improve your CO2 footprint.
True.
When we then talk about design adjustments, I agree. Then, if you consider already the future, then you might incur additional costs, and then let's see whether then also our suppliers are prepared, and your suppliers obviously then also are prepared to spend this additional euro or US dollar.
Right.
But at the final end, then here we need also the government. So we need then rules, because we also have social responsibilities and we have to be profitable. If we do it just in one dedicated region, just bring up now Germany, and do it not live internationally, then at a certain point of time, we also have a social responsibility. So if we go bankrupt, then we're also not living our social responsibility. So let's see. I'm really hoping on the international, on the governments, let me say, especially on the Western world, that it will be established. I would just like to add on the topic before, also a comment. We talk about the culture, and I fully agree. And what we try also to do is to also support, to drive this culture by communication, regular communication, to really make our employees aware of that it's really also coming from the management and that we are supporting it, and also provide here additional capacity.
Absolutely. Very good point. Okay. Well, gentlemen, I think we've pretty much run out of time here, and I want to thank you for fantastic input to this great debate, and it's one that's going to go on, continue for a long time to come. So thank you very much to Otto Puck from INCAP at the end there, to Mark Achhammer from CATEC, Josef Ernst from ASMPT, Assembly Systems, and of course to Anthony Ambrose from Data.io. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you to our audience for watching today.